Welcome to the Qasim Rashid Show, a civil rights lawyer here to expose all forms of injustice with a sprinkling of dad jokes in between. Here's your host, Qasim Rashid.
Good morning and peace be upon you this beautiful Sunday, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. My friends, I want to thank you all for tuning in, for your emails, your notes, your texts, your tweets. I appreciate them immensely, and I'm grateful that you continue to share the show with your family and friends. Keep the messages coming, keep the conversation ongoing. I want to cover three things today. I want to cover some of the progress we've made in our advocacy. I want to invite on a returning guest, Kat Calvin. I adore this person. She's amazing at the work she does to save our democracy. I want to talk about the debacle of Trump's media hit with the NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. And then let's talk about the VP pick as well. And finally, I want to talk about Project 2025 and its attack on public education. As you know, on my Substack, I've been doing a series on Project 2025, covering everything from abortion to DEI to how it's overall fascism. This week, I did a deep dive into their hit on education, and it is bad. So we'll talk about that later in the show. I also want to encourage you guys to support my work there as well. We just surpassed 100 days on Substack, and it's been pretty exciting. We've earned more than 80,000 subscribers. Our articles have been read more than 5 million times. And our subscribers, it gives you a cool little map, represent people from all 50 states. So whatever state is in existence, we have subscribers, and 130 countries globally. How cool is that? I've got people in Australia and South Africa and Ghana and Argentina and Russia reading my article, which is pretty cool. We've recorded and aired 15 of these shows, written over 102 pieces on critical topics like Project 2025, genocide in Gaza, electing VP Harris, SCOTUS reform, racial justice, economic justice, combating anti-Semitism, women's rights, the Olympics. And we're being quoted. We're being recognized as a national voice, the New Republic, Business Insider, The Wrap, Yahoo News, Black Press USA, Newsweek, and several others are quoting us in their ongoing reporting. So thank you all for subscribing. You can go to my website, QasimRashid.com. It's on all my social media profiles. You can subscribe at $5 a month, at $50 a year. We've got a couple of dozen generous donors at $500 a year. Or you can subscribe for free as well. My goal is to keep the content accessible and available. And, you know, with the ongoing failure of legacy media and the lack of trust in legacy media because they're so corporate bought and they're so corporate influenced, to me, it's critical that we have independent voices in this space. And for me, as a human rights lawyer, you know, I launched this project titled "Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid" with this goal. It's a deep dive into the human rights issues that affect humanity. I pull from my experience as a human rights lawyer. I bring the receipts to disentangle fact from fiction and advance the fight for universal human rights. And in doing so, we hold powerful politicians accountable, we hold media accountability, and we make sure that you have meaningful, insightful, accessible information to help you disentangle so much of what's going on in the world right now. And like I said, the fact that we have more than 80,000 subscribers in just the first 100 days, the fact that we have over 5 million reads, and the fact that we have subscribers from all 50 states across 130 countries globally, to me is a testament of how valuable this information is, the fact that you guys are reading it and sharing it, and the fact that you guys continue to do so. All right, when we come back from break, and I'm going to make this a short break. When we come back, I'm going to bring on an amazing young woman named Kat Calvin. She is no stranger to the show. She'll be here to discuss voting rights. But beyond that, I want to do a deep dive into two things. I want to talk about kind of, again, the media complicitness in failing to hold Trump accountable. He attended the National Association of Black Journalists the other day, and it was a debacle. We'll play a clip from that. I also want to talk about the VP pick because we should be hearing that very, very soon. I have my ideas. Kat Calvin has her ideas, and I don't know who she's going to pick. I don't know who her pick is. So either we're going to be fighting or we're going to be agreeing. But either way, it's going to make for a good show, and we'll both present our case. To be clear, I want Governor Walz of Minnesota. I think he's fantastic. He's accomplished. He's brilliant, he's kind, he's compassionate, and he can bring in a unifying ticket, which to me is very exciting. All right, when we come back, we'll have Kat Calvin. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm excited to welcome back Kat Calvin. She's no stranger to the show. She's been here a number of times before. In fact, I looked back and Kat was one of our first guests ever, I think like in episode 8. Now we're on episode 131. So it's exciting to welcome back one of our original pillars of this program. Kat is the founder and executive director of Spread the Vote and Project ID, co-founder CEO of Project ID Action Fund. She's a lawyer, she's an activist, she's a social entrepreneur, she's a rock star, has built a national organization that's helped tens of thousands of people obtain IDs. Her first book came out last year called American Identity Crisis. It is a must read. And while it is about voting rights, not Black or South Asian identity, I am asking her to talk today about the attacks on Kamala Harris. Kat, it's great to have you back.
Well, congrats on 130-ish shows. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've got an amazing producer in Alexa who produces this show, and then bringing on rock stars like you makes it all the better. So thanks for making it possible.
Of course. And hey, the news never stops, so you'll be at show 1,000 before you know it.
Hey, exactly. Well, I want to, so with content like this, it's going to get there. I want to start by talking about Trump being invited by the National Association of Black Journalists, which I think caught a lot of people kind of off guard as to why would you invite him, and then kind of fumble the invitation for Kamala Harris as well. But nonetheless, I want to pause for a minute and just play the opening clip where he's asked about his past remarks that are racist and white supremacist, and the fact that he's down with white supremacists, and his response, and then we can come back and talk about that.
I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country.
So, initially off the bat, I've got to give credit to the journalist for asking such a direct question and saying, look, here are the receipts of the racist things that you've said. And his response to me is textbook white fragility. He gets defensive, he clams up, and I thought, okay, he's off to a rocky start, but he'll probably calm down. It actually got worse from there.
Yeah.
It was. I'm sitting there eating popcorn. It got really bad. Well, one, I want to just get your thoughts on his overall comments, but two, kind of as predicted, you look at the headlines and you see a complete just abdication of duty. And what I mean by that is, the Boston Globe, their headline is Harris faces a pivotal moment as Trump questions her identity. The Washington Post goes, Trump's attacks on Harris's racial identity moves contest into new phase. Why is legacy media so racist and bad at this stuff?
Well, second question first. It's because everyone who runs legacy media and most of the people who write for it are also white and fragile, and they don't know how to deal with this any other way.
Yeah.
They don't know what else to do. When I watched this, I thought the same thing that I used to think back when Twitter was a thing and Trump was tweeting all the time, which is just nobody loves this man.
Yeah.
Because if I tweeted like he used to or got on stage and said the things that he says, 15 people would have already committed me to a mental hospital and I would have had a long, hard conversation with my grandmother, right? Like
Right.
usually there are people who be like, I'm going to take your phone and change the password and we're going to have a lot of conversations before you can get back on social media. And no one ever does that for Trump because no one actually really cares about him at all. And it's very clear at this point that anyone who is still sort of sane or reasonable isn't on his campaign, right? Like when even Fox News is trying to like tone him down, you know
Yeah.
you have a problem. And this it's definitely textbook white fragility, but really it was just so much more. It's just textbook Trump. And I have been at a point for a really long time where I don't even really blame Trump that much anymore for what he says or does because he's so clearly out of his mind.
Yeah.
And instead, I always look at all of the people around him, right? Like at the RNC, there are 25 family members around him, and none of them actually care enough about him to rein him in. And that I think is what we're seeing is just an unhinged man with nobody who actually loves or cares about him. Certainly not his wife.
Well, and his VP is not helping either. I mean, his VP, his wife, who I don't have any sympathy for her because she
No.
is choosing this, right? And just watching, and I think the reports came out that she herself was disgusted by Trump, but now she's obviously working to get Trump elected, which is kind of the status quo for MAGA extremists. But she's Indian, and I wrote an article about this for Substack, and it went viral beyond what I thought it was going to go because people, I don't think, realize how much racism she's facing from the MAGA crowd
Yeah.
for the crime of having melanin in her skin.
And her
And
kids.
well, that's the point I was going to make, that JD Vance was asked about Trump's comments mocking Kamala Harris's biracial identity, and like, dude, you're the father of biracial kids, and he goes, "Oh, I just found it hysterical." Like, really? Like, if I'm his kids in 15, 20 years, I'm looking back at that and thinking, like, what the hell was my dad doing? What is going on? What is it about MAGAs? You saw the same thing with Ted Cruz,
Yep.
kind of falling at the altar of Trump after he insulted his wife. What is it with MAGAs that they pay homage to the man who's insulting their like loved ones and their children and their flesh and blood? Like, do you have no shame? Do you have no self-identity? Is this like a weird Stockholm syndrome thing going on? I can't figure this out.
So, one of the things that we've always sort of complained about as Democrats is that Republicans always fall in line.
Yeah.
And Democrats are too big a tent, and we're always so busy fighting within ourselves that we can't actually get anything done. I remember living in DC. And I would, on my way to the DNC for things, I'd pass the RNC. And the RNC is this big, beautiful, stately building. And people in suits would walk in and out. And like, it always looked so professional. And then you'd walk like down an alley to the DNC, which is this like dilapidated brick building, like built in the worst architectural period in history. And there'd be like plastic chairs outside and people with fleece jackets like walking about. And I always think like, this is the difference. But what happens is, the Republicans have spent decades teaching their people to just fall in line.
Yeah.
And they started when Trump was the nominee. I mean, the fact that they didn't all revolt when he came down a golden staircase and said, all Mexicans are rapists, right? And didn't say, hey, this is not going to be part of our party. Instead, they let him run. They were more shocked than anybody that he won, but they immediately fell in line because that's just what they've been trained to do. And all of the leadership did it and everyone did it. And so all of the people, I mean, look, they've been convincing poor white people forever that the key to helping them is to vote for rich white people who are going to give tax breaks to more rich white people, right? Like that's what the whole KKK was made up of, people who should have been in solidarity with poor blacks because they were poor whites, but instead they allowed wealthy white people to tell them, oh no, it's these black people, right? Like this is what he's trying to do with the black jobs thing, except that it's not going to work on us because we've been poor forever. And so because you have this party that since its inception has been taught, you fall in line behind the leader, they fall in line behind the leader.
Yeah.
And it's a cult. There's this really good book called When Prophecies Fail. And it's all about how in cults, whenever there's a prophecy like the world's going to end December 8th, 2012, and then on December 9th, you're still here, how it actually makes cults stronger and it makes them believe more because you have to, right? Like you've given everything. So many MAGA people, they've lost friends, they've lost family, they've lost jobs. They have to be in this and they have been trained many their whole lives. You have to fall in line. And so
absolutely.
What they're doing, and it is the, and now Republicans regret it, but it is the result of decades and decades of training.
It is, and really what's ironic to me is when you think about how, you made a comment earlier, Kat, that I want to double down on, that there actually was a revolt to Trump, right? Ted Cruz called him a narcissist and compulsive liar. Marco Rubio said that he's a con man. Nikki Haley said that Donald Trump is everything I teach my 5-year-old not to do. Lindsey Graham called him a kook and a xenophobic religious bigot. His VP called him America's Hitler. J.D. Vance called him America's Hitler. And so now when they're like, well, Democrats, all they do is name call because they can't, beat us on policy. Well, we're just repeating the names that you guys called them yourself. And, we still have a conscience and a spine. I will give credit where credit is due. Mother Jones, I thought, had a really good headline in response to Trump's debacle at the National Association of Black Journalists. Their headline was, "White man tells black journalist his black opponent is not black."
Yeah.
I thought that's an example of how you do journalism. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with the wonderful Kat Calvin, who is the founder and executive director of Spread the Vote and Project ID. You should pick up her book called American Identity Crisis, which is a critical read right now, especially as Republicans are ramping up the attacks on voting rights. And it'll give you all the arguments and talking points and understandings you'll need to have on how to fight back against that misinformation and how to protect our democracy. Speaking of protecting our democracy, Kat, I don't know who your VP pick is. I know who mine is. And so I'm going to find out live when you're going to tell me, and we're either going to high five or we're going to fight on live television. So who's your VP pick and why?
Look, I have been advocating for this person since before Biden dropped out because we all knew he was going to. Yeah. I have been literally calling and texting everyone I know who is 6 degrees or less from the White House and be like, look, it's got to be Mark Kelly. And it has to be Mark Kelly. And hear me out. First of all, he's an astronaut. They are the greatest human beings alive. And also, you can't not vote for an astronaut. He's the child of 2 cops. Right? He's a Navy captain. He was a Navy captain before he became an astronaut. He's a vet. His wife, Gabby, not only was an extraordinary person and congresswoman, but also was the victim of an assassination attempt, like Trump is pretending to be, although clearly that was staged. And is a really incredible advocate for gun rights, but has this like really amazing story about why. He is from Arizona, which first of all, Arizona is where I live now most of the time, and we have a Democratic governor, so we'll have a Democratic appointed senator until the election, but also really good. Like there's a good Dem bench. We've got Ruben Gallego running against batshit Carrie Lake, who's definitely going to be her. Knock on all the wood. But also that could so galvanize Arizona voters who already, so we have, because there was this huge abortion issue, and luckily we have a Dem gov, and so abortion rights to some degree were protected, but there's an abortion measure that will be on the ballot that Arizona is one of the states that turned in thousands and thousands of more signatures than we needed. So already women are really really, really galvanized to vote across the aisle. And I'm actually working on partnering with this amazing organization to really bring out the Navajo vote, which is a massive, I was born on that reservation. It's a huge reservation. It's got tons of young people. It's got tons of people who want to vote. We make it really, really difficult for young people to vote on reservations. They really came out in 2020. They are huge supporters of Mark Kelly. I actually think that choosing Mark Kelly could turn Arizona blue in a really real way. And if you look at a lot of the other people who she's looking at, either they're governors and they are in states where there is no guarantee that a Dem governor will be elected. And we already have very few Dem governors across the country. Or they are people who have issues, like Shapiro's got this whole woman issue in his history that's going to be a real problem, right? Like you've got people with other issues. So I think it's got to be Mark Kelly.
All right, I think you made a compelling case there. I really do. I think that that Tim Walz is the guy. And the reason why I think Tim Walz is the guy is because he's got experience in Congress for about 12 years. And in Congress, he was a pretty strong moderate, right? He wasn't like this far left guy, so he's not going to be attacked for being some far left guy. As governor, he's had one of the most successful and progressive records you'll find, and he did it with just a one-term majority. Even before getting to Congress, this guy was a high school teacher. He's a veteran for 24 years. And by the way, as a high school teacher, he was also state champion high school football coach. You can't beat that. I don't see Mark Kelly winning state championships. Just throwing it out there.
He's an astronaut. Did Tim Walz go to space for a year?
You don't got to convince me. I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid. And so that's one of my long regrets. So I'll give you credit. But here's where I think Walz outdoes Kelly. I think he does in 3 areas. One, he's got a more progressive record. And if you want to activate the youth vote, that's how you're going to do it. You know, he's passed the free school lunches. He's decriminalized marijuana. He has done an excellent job of taxing billionaires, raising the tax rate on the wealthy, and that's using the surplus for actual social service programs. 2, on issues that young people care about regarding Israel and Palestine, Tim Walz is way better than Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly right now is getting slammed for attending Netanyahu's speech and clapping and applauding Netanyahu, a credibly accused war criminal who's killed, by, according to the Lancet, hundreds of thousands of people. Kelly was there applauding him. Tim Walz obviously was not. And then finally, from a messaging standpoint, this whole push that these guys are weird. I mean, Tim Walz started that, and it's taken off. It's effective. He's reaching people in a meaningful way, especially pulling people into the Midwest. That's going to be a big need. We need to win Michigan. We need to win Wisconsin. Tim Walz brings that Midwestern rural vibe that I don't think Mark Kelly can bring. So that's why my pitch is for Tim Walz in this space. And then they're about the same age too, I think, right? How old is Mark Kelly? Tim Walz is
they're both middle-aged white men. I don't know how. I mean, here's my thing. Yeah, the Netanyahu thing is a big problem. But I don't think Kamala needs help engaging the youth vote. Like Swifties for Harris has tens of thousands of members, and she's got this whole brat thing going on. Like the youth are ready for Kamala. So I feel like that's not necessarily where we need to engage people. I think that if you're looking at engaging moderate whites who may still be on the fence, shockingly, can't imagine how, that some super progressive guy from Minnesota, which is not a state that we need to deliver. So sure, maybe other parts of the Midwest, but I think she's fine in Michigan. She's got Trump. I don't know if you saw the poll that just came out with Trump having 0% of the black vote. And we've got Whitmer in Michigan. Like,
that's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Michigan is fine. I feel like what we're looking for in a VP is the same thing that we often are, right? It's the reason that Tim Kaine was chosen. It's the reason Biden was chosen, is you need a safe older white dude who makes older white people feel comfortable. But, and for me, I'm like, all right, if you they're going to look at sort of quick points, right? They're going to look at astronaut kids who are parents who are cops, whatever, that it's such a good, strong selling point for boomers who still think that, there are certain things that make you a better American. And I don't know if Walz just, there's nothing sexy about
Yeah, it's not a beauty pageant. I mean, I don't care.
It's been a beauty pageant since Kennedy v. Nixon. Definitely a beauty
That year
pageant.
definitely was. Look, my thing is, I just wish. I mean, I see your point about, appeasing the moderate whites and trying to get some conservatives and centrists to flip. I just don't see any evidence that that actually works.
Well,
And
but did you see the villages? That was wild. They had a whole parade for Kamala in the villages?
really, I did
Like,
not see that. That's why.
oh,
Yeah.
it was just a few days ago, and literally a whole golf cart parade for Kamala all through the villages. Like, it was the old folks are coming out on the other side. So I think there's a real chance. There's also, so all these Zoom calls are happening. There's an LDS for Harris call happening, a Latter-day Saint
Wow.
for Harris. Wait,
I did not expect that.
right. I saw that and I was like, oh, she's going to win all 50 states. Like, that is wild. So I
That is
think
wild.
we're in a moment when the right VP can turn a lot of groups that
Yeah.
a lot of people wouldn't expect. And it is, the Netanyahu thing was really upsetting. And I was like, Mark, what is you doing? But I think maybe she could get him to apologize or something.
I don't know
I
about
think
that.
there are so many other points that if we're looking at, hey, this could actually be a really revolutionary election. And we also need it to be, because we know that there are so many plans in play to not certify the election. I live in one of the Arizona counties. It's a very small rural county. It's so different from LA. It's a real culture shock. And it's one of the counties where the county recorder didn't want to certify the election. So I'm actually working with a candidate now who's trying to replace him,
Good.
which I think is going to make him want to certify the elections even less. And I think having someone who has the traditional boomer qualifications could bring along more people who could make this
How is
such an.
Waltz? You look at Waltz and he screams "Boomer Dad." Come on, if that's the qualification, Waltz, come on, he's got it. Well, I will say this. Where we do agree is I'm not seeing the appeal of Shapiro, and rumor has it that with launching in Philly, that's where she's leaning. I mean, in addition to him being really terrible on Israel-Palestine, he is taking he took corporate money from Jeffrey Yas, the MAGA billionaire, which is wild to me. He's taking like a couple $100,000 from him. He is pro fracking. He is pro corporate tax cuts. He is pro private school vouchers, public tax dollars for private school vouchers, which is kind of a staple of Project 2025. I don't understand.
And also, speaking of Arizona again, a report just came out, because Arizona has been so pro vouchers, and a report just came out showing that it absolutely bankrupted the state. Like, it's crazy that anyone. I know Shapiro would be the worst choice. I mean, I agree. Like, number two, Waltz for sure. People are looking at Cooper, but we need Cooper to stay and beat that madman in North Carolina.
And
same
with Bashir. I like Bashir. I do. But if we get rid of Bashir in Kentucky, they're not electing a Democratic governor.
Exactly.
They're completely screwed.
Yeah. Well, and that is where Waltz is sort of equally to Kelly. Those are two people who we know for sure. Like, Minnesota is going to elect another Dem Gov.
Yeah, agreed.
The Arizona governor
will appoint a Democratic.
Is going to appoint a Dem. So, I think those 2 points. I think too, like, Shapiro, along with the 2,000 other reasons that he is a bad choice. Pennsylvania, it's not a guarantee that they're going to elect a Dem Gov.
Right. That's right. And I've been reading articles on this because a lot of folks claim that one of the reasons to get Shapiro is to win Pennsylvania, but all the evidence shows that picking a VP from a state gives no guarantee, or there's no difference in the likelihood of winning that state. And so anyway, let's agree on that. We're good there. Let's channel our energy. I wouldn't be as thrilled with Kelly, but I definitely prefer Kelly over Shapiro. If you guys
agree on 1 and 2, we're just opposite sides, but I'd be happy with either one.
Definitely. If you guys are just tuning in, we are speaking to Kat Calvin, founder and executive director of Spread the Vote Project ID. We're down to our last 7 or 8 minutes, and I want to talk a bit more about the work you're doing, especially with democracy in crisis. And we're talking about trying to register voters, getting voter turnout increased. I was excited to see that after Biden decided to withdraw, which he should have done a year ago, but nobody listens to me anyway. There was a 700% increase in voter registrations, which is exciting. And I'm sure that's got to make you feel good with the work that you do. Can you talk a little bit about the work you're doing so people have a better understanding of kind of what you're focused on and how you're trying to save democracy?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say that's really, really important for people to remember, and I'm always shouting it from the rooftops, and then people hate me for it, but the biggest population, when you look at sort of a pie chart for every American election, there is a slice of people who were registered and voted. There's a slice of people who didn't vote and weren't registered. And the biggest slice of the pie is always registered voters who don't turn out.
Yep.
And that is because we put a lot of focus on voter registration, mostly because it's an easy and free to inexpensive thing to do that gets you a lot of numbers and looks really good, and zero focus on voter turnout, which is the really hard work because there's so many micro barriers that stop people from actually getting to the polls. So when you're looking at people, and if you look at people who aren't already registered, those are the people for whom it's the hardest to get to the polls. And so we have to focus beyond voter registration on how are we actually getting them to vote and how are we actually getting them to overcome those micro barriers. And that is really what our org does. You know, we are focused on helping people get IDs. Throughout the year, there are 26 million American adults who don't have government-issued photo ID, which means they can't get jobs, housing, medical care, all the things that you need an ID for. And so it's 11% of the adult population in America. It impacts them and the whole country in so many different ways. And so we focus on getting folks IDs so they can just live lives. But during elections, we focus on how do we help that population get to the polls. Voter turnout in America is directly correlated to socioeconomic status, right? So 99% of the 1% vote and 0 to 1% of the bottom percent. And so we focus on voter education, which is huge for everybody, regardless of education. Nobody knows what the insurance commissioner does, right? So nobody knows how to vote for them. Voting is really, really tough for folks, but particularly for folks who are the most vulnerable. So we focus on voter education. We focus on actually physically putting them in cars and getting them to the polls and helping with accessible transportation and babysitting and language support and whatever else. We run a program called Vote by Mail in Jail. It's the only national program to help incarcerated voters vote. We have a 79.4% turnout rate among our incarcerated voters from 2022. We actually had 100% from Cook County Jail and Wayne County Jail. And so this year we are significantly increasing the number of jails. We're in 54 around the country already and growing. And we will have thousands and thousands of incarcerated voters voting. And we run the entire program to help incarcerated voters vote from jail.
Two questions. I mean, first of all, you're doing the Lord's work. So God bless you for that. Two questions. One, explain this term micro barriers, because like I'm thinking of like a moat with alligators that you have to jump over to vote. And I know that's not it, but I'm trying to be silly. But explain the term micro barriers. And two, I want to get your opinion on what some countries like Australia do, where voting is compulsory and they have like a 90-some% turnout every single election.
Yeah, first of all, I'm an American. I'm against compulsory voting. Don't tell me what to do. And also, I often have people from countries with compulsory voting call me and ask me for help, including Australia, because people show up because they have to vote, but then they just sort of blow off the ballot. They will just fill in whatever dot they feel like or whatever. Like they show up because they have to, but they don't really care. And they end up with a lot of ballots that don't count, or just there's still not civic engagement. There's this whole tradition in Australia of like they have sausages with onions or whatever, sort of like the danger dogs we have in LA. But it's not a thing where people are super engaged. And you can see from Australian politics, like it doesn't make politics any more progressive or any better at all. And also, I'm an American. You tell me what to do, I'm gonna not do it because I don't know. This is America. So I'm very against compulsory voting. Micro barriers. So actually, the New York Times years ago put out this game, and I just actually checked it. It's still there. It's this 8-bit game where you play a person who has to face a bunch of barriers to vote. So it's everything from how do you get to the polls, right? So transportation, if you don't have a car, can be really tough. Are you taking the bus? Like most of the country doesn't have a metro or great transportation. And so that can be tough. Do you have a job that's going to give you the time off? Every state has different laws for how much time they're supposed to give you off. But if your hourly job doesn't give you the time off, what are you going to do? Find a lawyer and sue, right? So do you have a job? Are you a caretaker? Can you have someone who is taking care of the elderly person in your life or your children or whatever? Do you speak the language that's on the ballots? We have laws for if there is a certain percentage, I think it's 10%, but if there's a certain percentage of people in a district that speak a certain language, then they have to have ballots in those languages.
Right.
Most people don't know that, right? LA County does this amazing thing. I'm obsessed with the LA County Elections Board. I think they're the greatest people on earth. But they put up billboards all over the county in a ton of different languages so that people know, hey, you can come vote in your language. That's not a thing that happens in most of the country. And so people always think that if I show up, they're not going to have a ballot in Vietnamese or in French or in Spanish, even though a lot of times they will. And then there's really long lines, right? And so maybe you did get 2 hours off from Wendy's, but there's a 4-hour line and you have to work and you're getting paid hourly, you need that money. Also, you could get fired. And so there's so many different, and then, I mean, the accessibility issue, we have had so many people call us on election day because they're in wheelchairs and they can't get to the polls. And we've had to, we once had these 2 women in wheelchairs in rural Georgia, and we were on the phone in different states. None of us were in rural Georgia, and it took hours to find a wheelchair accessible van that could pick them up and get them to the polls, right? Not to mention, obviously, I just said there are 26 million adults who don't have photo ID, but you need photo ID to vote in 36 states. And really, functionally, even in those states where you don't have, there's not statewide ID laws, there are others, like in LA, if I want to vote in my neighborhood council, I need an ID. And also, if you don't have a job and you don't know where you're sleeping at night and et cetera, it can be really hard to even think about going to the poll. LA puts ballot boxes in homeless shelters, but most places don't do that. And so, there's so many, and then the rules. So we have a website called readtheeffingdirections.com that lays out very specifically all of the rules for how to turn in a mail-in ballot in each state, because it's so complicated. And so people are 5 times more likely to have their mail-in ballot thrown out, and people of color are twice as likely to have their mail-in ballot thrown out. And usually it's because it's the first time voting and the rules are so confusing that they can't figure it out. So we make all of these little challenges. And usually if you have one issue, you have 5 of them, right?
That's
because you're facing so many vulnerabilities. And so the voter registration is the easy part.
Yeah. And, I've always said, if we can do our taxes online, if I can look at my social security number, my EIN number, if I can do all, my banking, why can't I vote online? I mean,
and we do, because I have a friend who lives in Portugal. He's been an expat forever. He votes online. He votes through email.
Right. And so
it's already a system that's set up.
That's right. And we just make it difficult for no reason whatsoever. My father has Parkinson's and late stage Parkinson's. And, we had our primary elections in Illinois about 5 months ago. I took him to vote. And even with me there, going back and forth and talking to the person in charge of the voting booth and blah, blah, it was an hour-long process. Now, don't get me wrong. They were perfectly polite and sweet and thoughtful people and wanting to help. But it shouldn't take a person with Parkinson's having a son help him an hour to vote. I mean, it's asinine to me.
Well, and it's not for no reason whatsoever. It's for a very specific reason. I always tell this story. There was this great New York Times article about voting in India. And India is obviously a massive country that is also incredibly poor, but they are really committed to making sure every single person can vote. And there's a story about this man he's a monk, he lives alone on the top of a mountain, and every election, a couple of election workers take a polling booth and they go on like a 3-day hike up the mountain, set it up so this one man can vote, and then bring all the stuff back down the mountain. And then that is commitment to voter turnout that we don't have in this country. And we wouldn't need compulsory voting if we were so committed to making sure that we were getting every single person to vote. But both parties and the powers of both parties are much more invested in making sure that we make voting as difficult as possible so that only people who are most likely to vote for the entrenched powers are able to get to the polls.
Yeah, and that's not democracy. That's, I don't know
No,
what that is, but it's
not,
definitely not democracy. Kat
no.
Calvin, such a pleasure to have you join us every single time you are able to. How can folks find you on social media? How can they connect with you? How can they get in touch with you?
Um, well, I'm rarely on social media anymore because the Twitter machine is a Nazi stronghold now. But you can, I'm at Cat Calvin LA on Insta and Twitter. You also can find us at projectid.org or spreadthevote.org.
Kat Calvin, an amazing leader in the space. I'm so glad to have her on our show whenever we can get her. She is a founder and executive director of Spread the Vote and Project ID, co-founder and CEO of Project ID Action Fund. Pick up her book, American Identity Crisis. It is an absolute must-read about voting rights and the future of our democracy in this country. You are listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. That was Kat Calvin, an amazing leader in the space, doing the Lord's work. Definitely find her work, support her, pick up her book, American Identity Crisis. Highly recommend it. It's an excellent read. As we close out, I want to talk about Project 2025 and the attacks on public education. So imagine this. Imagine a future where the Department of Education is eliminated. Any discussion of racism or DEI is criminalized, not just banned, but criminalized. Public tax dollars fund private Christian schools, your public tax dollars, and discrimination against LGBTQ Americans is completely legalized. That, in a nutshell, is what Project 2025 intends to do with education in America. And in doing so, their view is a fascist dystopia where every school is a religious institution teaching Christian nationalist theocracy, a place where secular education has no place. As a human rights lawyer, I am actually reading the entire 900-page Project 2025 fascist manifesto, so you don't have to, and then giving you the tools to debunk its claims. And so I want to do this deep dive into Project 2025 and its attacks on education because I cannot underestimate or overestimate. I cannot overestimate the threat that this is to our children. And you know, people keep saying, well, you're overreacting, you're taking this too seriously. I really can't. I mean, this is such a critical part of where we are as a country right now. We need to take this seriously. There's a reason why Trump is distancing himself from it, because he's realizing just how insane it actually is. But here's where we are. Project 2025 mentions education at least 400 times. The phrases education, public schools, etc., are mentioned more than 400 times. And the forward sets the tone for how degradingly it treats public education. It argues for universal school choice, defunding any institution who opposes this mandate, and leans firmly into the critical race theory as a boogeyman monster. It says, and I'm quoting, universal school choice is a goal all conservatives and conservative presidents must pursue. But even before we achieve that long-term goal, parents' rights as their children's primary educators should be non-negotiable in American schools. States, cities, counties, school boards, etc., who disagree should be immediately cut off from federal funds. The noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology should be excised from curricula in every public school in the country. These theories poison our children, who are being taught on the one hand to affirm that the color of their skin fundamentally determines their identity. So a lot of nasty big words there, but as I write in this article on Substack, this is nothing more than playing victim. It plays victims when it claims that parents no longer have any power over what their children learn. And therefore, the next president should defund any public institution who denies parental rights. None of this is true. Parents play a full role and have always played a full role over public school curriculum. And they do that through locally elected school board members, on the state level through state legislators, and federally through U.S. Congress. There is nobody else except parents who have a role in what their kids learn. As a father of 3 children myself, let me be very clear. I know exactly what my children are learning because I'm involved in the process of the curriculum, of the school boards, of the local and state electeds, of the federal electeds. That's what a good parent should be doing. So if you don't know what your kids are learning, you have one person to blame, MAGAs, and that's yourself. Likewise, this boogeyman of critical race theory is, again, it's a common talking point. Critical race theory isn't happening in public elementary, middle, or high schools. It's a college to law school level course. I say this as somebody who went to law school. And all it basically teaches is that we need to recognize that historically race has played a role in how laws were written. And if you deny that, you're denying the centuries of slavery, the centuries of Jim Crow, mass incarceration, financial disenfranchisement, the FHA housing loans. I mean, the list goes on and on. And then finally, I find it laughable when these right-wing pundits object to the idea that skin color determines identity. The same group that says, I don't see color, suddenly sees color really, really well. The same group saying that color doesn't matter is still condemning Usha Vance, the Indian-American wife of VP candidate J.D. Vance, because of her skin color. And the same group that says color doesn't matter would have us ignore that Black women suffer a 300% higher maternal mortality rate than white mothers, that Black and Indigenous children suffer a 300% higher infant mortality rate than white children, that police arrest Black and Latino Americans at a rate of 6 to 10 times that of white Americans, despite similar crime rates, and that Black wealth is still a fraction wealth of white Americans and getting worse. The wealth gap is getting worse, even 60 years after the Civil Rights Act were passed. And so just to enact this fascist agenda, the first step that Project 2025 takes is to dismantle the Department of Education altogether. It says on page 285, the Department of Education is a convenient one-stop shop for the woke education cartel. This department is an example of federal intrusion into a traditionally state and local realm. For the sake of American children, Congress should shutter it and return control of education to the state. So we're back to the states' rights BS. And so in doing so, Project 2025 tries to undermine the number one reason Congress created the Department of Education in 1979, which is, quote, to strengthen the federal commitment to ensuring access to equal educational opportunity for every individual, end quote. In a post-Jim Crow America, Jimmy Carter saw that for too many young people, their zip code determined their education level and success. And so the Federal Department of Education sought to change that. And sadly, despite nearly a half century, not enough has changed. Zip codes still largely determine a child's education level. But by eliminating federal minimum standards, as Project 2025 seeks to do, this will only get worse, particularly for Black and Latino children or for children from low-income backgrounds. And so, this is how Project 2025 then goes on a rampage. First step, get rid of the Department of Education. Next step, get rid of Title I funding. It wants to completely eliminate Title I funding, first giving a block grant to states to use however they wish, which of course is code word for letting them make private school vouchers for Christian theocracies. And this, again, would disproportionately hurt low-income Black and Latino children, who, by the way, already get $23 billion less in annual funding than white majority schools. This would also exacerbate the race divide and empower the Christian nationalist theocracy in education. It would undermine the very fabric of religion-state separation upon which this country has existed for nearly 250 years. Next, Project 2025 wants to get rid of Parent Plus loans and federal Pell Grants. It wants to privatize those, again, making the wealth divide worse. It wants to get rid of Head Start, which serves nearly 1 million low-income children. I mean, this is like that Jordan meme, like F them kids, right? This is what they're basically saying. They want to legalize discrimination. On page 584, Project 2025 calls for the outright elimination of laws and regulations that ban discrimination of LGBTQ students and Americans. Let's get rid of them and just open season on LGBTQ Americans. It's barbaric and backwards what this Project 2025 fascism wants to do. And then they want to privatize loans altogether. They want to transfer all student debt and loans into private entities so they can exploit and make them even more profitable for the banks, and then eliminating any attempts to cancel student loans for any reason whatsoever. And while Project 2025 does call for a return of fraudulently taken PPP loans, it makes no demand to cancel or to uncancel the canceled PPP loans. Remember, there's nearly $1 billion in PPP loans that were canceled, probably even more now to think about it. But Project 2025 makes no attempt to want to undo the cancellation of PPP loans, which is, again, wild hypocrisy. Apparently, the payback which you took out rule only applies to struggling students under a mountain of exploitative predatory debt, not to major corporations and politicians who had billions in loans canceled. So in short, in conclusion, here's the bottom line. Project 2025 fears a public education system that calls for meaningful racial justice and accountability. They fear the system that upholds a mirror to the injustices of white supremacy and one that demands equal access to education of children of all races and socioeconomic backgrounds. This horrifies them because, as the old saying goes, when you've had privilege your whole life, equality feels like oppression. So not only do they want to ban teaching DEI, they want to criminalize it. Not only do they want to ban the existence of LGBTQ Americans, they want to legalize violent discrimination against them. Not only do they want to ban access to public education and replace it with a Christian theocracy, they want to exacerbate those who are already low income and make the divide even worse. So it is critical that we remain vigilant and engaged to ensure that this does not become policy. You have my commitment. I will continue to raise awareness and create education in this space. Check out my Substack, subscribe to that. I'll send out these daily updates so you have the information at the tips of your fingers, because right now we cannot sit silent. We cannot sit idle. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to follow me on social media at Qasim Rashid across all platforms. You can go to QasimRashid.com to subscribe to my Substack. I will continue to advance a show that builds on compassion, justice, and accountability for those in power. We got a great show for next week. Be sure to tune in, same time, same place, at 10 a.m. on Sunday on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.